Okay, it's probably Wednesday morning. It is right around midnight Tuesday. Um, and we just had a crazy turn where France surrendered in order to maintain, in order to get back the victory points, whatever that they lost within France and within territories that they can't lose through a formal peace. And the only reason they surrendered is basically Austria played this little game where it made more sense for them to capture Paris. And then France was given an opportunity to basically come back into the game. Now we're in a chaotic place. We have a year and a half of the game left. These are the current victory points from, I think it's total victory points, honestly, because the Brits were behind the Austrians before they got their naval advantage. This is the current total victory points. This is the Turks, Russians here, just color-wise. Prussians don't have any. And we're at a point where, yeah, reinforcements and replacements get placed. I generally don't like to do that before diplomacy for the most part. But in terms of diplomacy, there are no miners left to do diplomacy on. France doesn't have any miners that can be stripped away. And we're in a position where a lot of countries are free to do new things. There's still a coalition between Britain, Spain, and Austria, which can throw some confusion into the world. The French army, along with its Russian-lent troops, which will be there for the rest of the game as well, is relegated to Poland right now. I think the French have to attack Prussia. The question is, what does anyone else do? It's a hard call. Factors to this hard call is the bloc friction. Specifically, there are certain things that the bloc votes on and then has to do or leave the bloc. Here's the interesting thing. Whether the bloc should join one of its members in a declaration of war made by it. I'm not sure who, if anyone, pays the penalty for kicking them out of the alliance under those circumstances. So let's say Austria declares war on Prussia, and Spain doesn't want to, and let's say Britain doesn't want to, although they maybe would be okay with it. Now the bloc as a whole has agreed not to support that declaration of war, but did Austria really violate the treaty by declaring war? That doesn't seem right either. Did the bloc violate the conditions by not joining the war? Maybe, but they could do that individually if the bloc voted to support the war and somebody like Spain didn't want to enter it. Of course, yeah, so I'm trying to figure out the answer to that one. And here we have some situations require you to break an alliance. This is where the victory point penalty comes in. Player cannot break an alliance if he has units in any ally's territory. Okay. Luckily, that one doesn't apply because that raises some interesting questions. I feel like the alliance is broken if Austria declares war and Britain and Spain decide not to join it. And we're not really seeing anything here. Breaking an alliance costs a victory point. It's just not clear to me. I don't know. Because the bloc has to be broken because the bloc is at war with everybody that members of the bloc are at war with. I just don't know. I feel like reason says Austria should be able to declare that war, and the bloc should be able to vote and not support it, and no one should be penalized. But I don't know. Anyway, like I said, France is going to go to war with Prussia because they can't. They could attack Turkey if they wanted to, but Prussia gets them towards the center where they want to be. There's no French chit, so I have nothing to pull off the map or whatever. The sequence of diplomacy has to do with players making announcements in order. So, I mean, we'd look at this. Spain does nothing. Turkey does nothing. Prussia, they can't face France alone. They're not powerful. They're losing. They're the only player with no victory points. They just want to leave the fucking game, honestly. Austria. Does Austria want to declare war on Prussia? My troops are not really in position for that. So we'll pause on that and not do it. Russia's happy with their war with Turkey. They could go to war with Prussia if they wanted to, but they're not really in range. They could go to war with Austria if they wanted to, but they'd like to get something out of the Turks maybe. France is going to declare war on Prussia. Sorry. Yeah. Supplies! And Britain. I mean, I don't really want to attack Spain or Austria because I'd be at a loss there. I'm not really in position to attack Prussia, and I'm not in position to attack Turkey either. So I don't think any of those are going to happen. So I think here in the autumn, the only thing that's going to happen is France is declaring war on Prussia. Prussia has no allies. They could be trying to ask for some, but they don't find out that France attacks them before that. They might have tried to ask for a block entry, but that block can't enter the war. So, yeah, they can't go to war with France. So, there we have that. So it wouldn't provide any special advantages. So I think the only thing that's going to happen is France is declaring war on Prussia, and countries like Spain, they have victory points. I don't know what I did there. Actually, they may not, because I think the only thing they own is Madrid, and they're a point back for a penalty, so they actually may be at 0 as well. Again, someone who can't really win the game. So, where else were we? I don't know. I don't know what I was talking about there. But yeah, I think the only thing we're going to see... Oh, I was trying to figure out what the Spanish are going to do. I think they'll try to head back home. Maybe they can take the Brits on, but not really. Not without a navy. I mean, the only thing we could do is try to poach Portugal and Gibraltar again. Kind of fucked up. I drew a couple of Empire land markers, which can't go because they went last. Then I drew a coalition naval. Well, unfortunately, I thought, wow, I should throw the coalition naval 2 marker in too. Probably should have done that because Britain wants to prepare themselves. Yeah, they can't do that. In fact, they shouldn't have even moved on the coalition naval. I moved a bunch of their stuff though, so I'm not going to undo that. But yeah, the coalition is actually not a bloc, Russia and Prussia. There's no reason for them to ally Russia if they somehow, they might get into a position where they want to attack Prussia, so, because Königsberg is worth points. Berlin if I get that far. But yeah, the game turns absolutely goofy now. It's like, oh look, France surrendered. Now we will squabble over the remainder. And there's absolutely, like, War and Peace has this danger too. But in War and Peace, the game immediately ends on the French defeat or a second defeat if you're playing with that option. Which means the coalition kind of has to stick together. And so you don't have a lot of this kind of end of game jockeying in the way that you do. You might, if Napoleon doesn't come back for a year, you might end up seeing some reason for countries to try to hit one another, and then Napoleon comes back in the midst of all of that or whatever. Empires in Arms, because the majority of the victory points aren't going to come from territories you hold or whatever, and none of them come from stuff you just wander into, right? You have to conquer things, which means, yeah, the minors might induce something like that late in the game. But I don't know. There's something very weird about the Empires in Arms victory conditions because it's based on the glory that you receive rather than, the actual geopolitics. This and War and Peace follow the geopolitics. The idea that, like, oh yeah, I won a battle, or I won a bunch of battles, and that constant military success kept my glory level high enough, or whatever the hell it's actually called. And thus I just was producing a lot of victory points each turn. That's a kind of weird thing with that. So it doesn't really compare in the same sort of way. It is possible that you could look at things and say, it looks like Russia's, getting close to being able to declare a victory, so we should probably bail. We should probably hammer them or something like that. But at least it's like some sort of balance type thing. Here, it's not, there's nothing to drive you to hit one particular person, except maybe if those points, like Britain would love to hit France, but they're not allowed to. They'd love to hit Austria. They might. There are points in Austria's hands that they could get to, notably Rome, maybe Venice, but that's about it. I'm looking from the British point of view right now. But yeah, I'm, again, disheartened by what I just did. And again, this fuck up. Why is there a fuck up? Well, because, I don't know, it's hard to remember that it's not the British turn anymore, is basically what it comes down to. I can't undo what I did. And they didn't do much. Mainly they just shifted boats around. But it's possible winter quarters could come up twice before their naval shit comes up. And putting this in doesn't help them. The only thing it helps is Prussia and Russia, neither of whom can really do shit with their navies. Russia's navy is doing what it can, basically. This one can't do much. And the Prussian navy can't face the French anymore. The French are significantly bigger, even though they don't have much of a navy left. Well, it's been a few days. It's Sunday morning now. And I ran away from the game, obviously, for a while. Largely just a matter of getting myself into another deeper addiction, but I don't know, less demanding, but more compelling in its own way, which is something I'm used to. And in a way, me playing Raid had been an attempt to avoid this kind of really deeper addiction. Again, just video games, but very story-based, and I'm just like, but it's getting hot, and I'm probably not going to make it through winter, probably not going to make it through autumn today, but I've got things that I can do outside of board games. Actually, at the bar on Friday, two different people, both of whom I've had discussions about gaming, one of whom I gamed with, approached me about gaming in various levels. So that might be something. Of course, the magic involved in that came with a cost, and I lost a bag that I've had for many decades. That meant something to me, but that's okay. All right, well, we'll see what we draw. I'm really unsure where I am in the game. Can kind of try to look. So yeah, France is at war with Prussia. Russia is still at war with the Turks. Where Russia doesn't have a lot to gain. The only thing that they can gain from this war is Constantinople. So, I don't know. I guess they could get Alexandria. Got another navy I could bring down. That wouldn't be too bad a play to get 2 points. But that's the kind of distinction we're looking at, is like Russia's trying to keep from being in last place. They're not going to be in last. You can see Prussia is low on points as well. Is there someone else? Spain, it looks like, is low on points because of the negatives there. I've still got these piled out there from before. So yeah, okay. They kind of required, and I broke with a couple of Empire land here that were unusable. Coalition land went, only Prussia moved because I've got lots of stuff I want to do with the Russians that involves things with ratings that are lower than 4. But then I got the neutral land, and this is a big deal. The neutrals, there are a lot of them at this point. And most of them have to withdraw from France, basically. Action, I mean, just coming up here is this huge force of will at this point. The same kind of thing that I expend for other stuff, but it's become worse for gaming than it usually is. Anyway, I drew myself an Empire Land 4, moved a couple of units that can operate on the 4. I didn't move this one. The reason I'm moving them is this fear of the turn ending too quickly. It is, after all, autumn, which means only 2 winter quarters knock us out. And, yeah, I mean, not much happened. 5:30 going on 6, somewhere in there. Monday morning, I guess. Again, having trouble getting up here, but I'm having trouble finding sleep. Right now, there's a little bit of a thunderstorm going on. Nothing too exciting, but it kind of energized me. I went outside, stood out, watched a couple of flashes, watched some things that look very much like cobs, but are explained by the lightning flashes. So they're not, if they have a physical explanation. Anyway, I pulled a winter quarters. Okay, great. And then I pulled a coalition naval that should not have been in there. I had actually accidentally taken a coalition land out, but I saw the coalition naval, didn't really think about it, and started moving my boats around. And I've kind of had to reverse that. Reality is we're going to have a coalition land phase now. With one of the winter quarters out, I'm going to move everything I possibly can, probably. But right now, the focus... See, things are kind of problematic at this point. So, for example, England is thinking, the only way for me to get victory points at this point would be attacking Turkey. Prussia is too hard. If Prussia surrenders to the Brits, and that's a big F, to be honest. And the Brits would be being pulled on the Empire marker in that case, right? If Prussia surrenders to the Brits, yeah, I can get Magdeburg, but I don't think I can take Brandenburg. Swedish Pomerania doesn't give me access to stuff over here. And for the most part, there aren't a lot of victory point cities. Now, this is kind of cool because Britain wouldn't want to take a lot of Prussian territory. So it doesn't really do much in terms of like screwing with Britain. Yeah, I forgot about East Prussia. Russia could take that. So Russia actually has an interest in... of course, if the Brits occupied Berlin without getting a surrender, then, you know, things change. Interestingly, Breslau is not important. Yeah, tell Austria that they're not interested in getting Breslau. You know, that they're not interested in getting Silesia back. Again, it's neither in their automatic victory conditions, nor is it in, nor is it considered an important city. And there's just so much, you know, of the around the edges. But where there are points, there's a point in Egypt and Constantinople I could occupy conceivably. This is about all I could take. There's nothing of value down here, but at least, you know, there's one point available there. There's nothing from Prussia. I can't really go to war with anyone else without breaking an alliance and therefore losing points. But here's the problem. If I want to declare war on Turkey, I've got to get the agreement of my allies. And I'm not sure they're willing to. And if I don't get it, then I have to break the alliance to make the war, as far as I can judge these pointless systems. So it's like, yeah, do we really want to let Britain off the hook to declare a war? I don't know. You know, similarly, does Britain want to allow Austria to declare war with its greater number of armies to take from Prussia? And that comes down to a, well, we're probably, you know, where are we going to end up in positioning under those conditions? And it probably isn't going to happen because Austria probably would gain more positional advantage than Britain would off of it. And neither one's going to get first place out of it. However, Austria and Britain might be interested in taking on Turkey, or they might be interested in taking on Russia. You know, I mean, it's just, there's like this crazy kind of pattern of what the fuck. In terms of Britain taking on Russia, yeah, we could maybe occupy St. Petersburg, but it doesn't look very valuable. So I kind of feel like nobody's going to actually enter a war because the cost is higher than the advantages that they get out of it, which kind of brings this to, hey, the rest of this game is moot, which is something I more or less was saying anyway. But then I looked at the points and I'm like, France isn't that far ahead. Yeah, but they're going to only gain off Prussia, right? What can they gain is the question. Not much. They could occupy stuff, is kind of the thing. I'm so tempted to just throw this in as a wash at this point, as I have been, you know, at other points in this, because I just feel like I'm, you know, coming up here and grinding against something I don't want to play. And it's pretty obvious what's actually going to happen, because Russia's not going to gain enough on Turkey. They can get maybe, you know, they can get a point for Constantinople, right? Russia's not going to gain enough on Turkey to win, to take the victory. Basically, forcing France to surrender meant that France won the game. And Austria kind of did that to them. And I don't know that Austria was gaining, you know, like Austria was behind until they made France surrender. So like, yeah, it was in their best interests. But I just kind of feel like it's pointless to play at this point. Do I quit? I don't know. Let me play out this shit. I don't want to. You know, there's almost nobody who's interested in me playing this game. There's a couple of people who are interested in it, but for the most part, viewership dropped way down. Fine, whatever. I can understand that. But also, there are people who are just like, God, when is this thing gonna fucking end? And the truth of the matter is, there's nothing more to learn here. There really isn't. Just the thought of like, what's the coalition? Well, that's the Russians. What's gonna happen? They're gonna probably fight a fucking major battle. I don't even want to do that. Like, it's to no advantage. We saw what the victory points were in this, and honestly, yeah, I mean, you could argue that the Brits made a mistake by moving on Paris, but I got to tell you, the Austrians could have done it on their own, and the same thing would happen. You can't cancel forcing a surrender by being part of the bloc or whatever. You can't like use voting to do that, and I don't see a point. So we're going to call this a French victory because they were able to get defeated. If they hadn't surrendered, they wouldn't have had a victory. I think the Brits were in second place. I don't see the Austrians being able to really gain anything of significance from this. Like, again, their opponents just don't have the points. Like, let's say Austria and Britain go to war with Turkey. Yeah, maybe Austria gets Constantinople, Britain gets Egypt. It's not enough to exceed what France has got. And again, France might get Königsberg, probably not. They can't get Königsberg and Berlin both because that would imply a surrender, which means they get neither, I think, to be honest, because what they end up gaining is if they have Thuringia, I'm not sure if they do, they can take Magdeburg. They can't take Brandenburg, I think, because it's the capital. But again, I don't even want to fucking look it up, because we're talking about a difference of a victory point here or there. And we're talking about playing, an amount of game that's not tremendous in terms of total effort, but in terms of my effort with my mental state and everything with regards to this game, we're talking another week and a half, 2 weeks to finish this up. And I'm just like, I don't want to do that. It's not worth it. It's not worth it for what there is available. It's very hard to judge anything on this because the victory conditions, the end state victory conditions, have such a chaotic nature to them. But we can look at some of the early moves and that France didn't do very well early on, but it doesn't make a fucking difference because France is big enough to hold a bunch of stuff that unless they're not yet surrendered, it's going to be really hard to take victory point locations away from them. What are they holding that's of any value right now? I mean, we can look at the list of what they're holding in hexes that they could have lost. Antwerp, I think they're still holding Antwerp. That could get taken away from them in a peace condition. Or, yeah. Warsaw conceivably could, if they hadn't gained Poland. Mantua could be taken away. Venice has already fallen. Munich has already fallen. Hanover's fallen. Amsterdam's fallen. Hamburg is not theirs. Yeah. This is a pretty bad position for France to be in this game. Yet, I think they just have an assured victory in it. They don't have to do anything that impressive. All they have to do is prevent this massive coalition from beating on them and holding them in a position where all of France is kind of occupied, but no one is like taking Paris or whatever. That's kind of the goal of the coalition. And that's going to fall apart in the multiplayer game. Now, the two-player game is different. Screw that. We can get to the two-player game and take a look at how that would be different. But in the multiplayer game, it feels to me like the end game victory conditions are such that it's not really there's at least one person who will force the surrender of France to gain some kind of positioning in the overall ranking, okay? Or a proportion of score, or however they want to accumulate their own victory points. Or just screw it, I'm tired of like not being able to play and we're just sitting there occupying France, without taking a piece. Let's take a quick look at the two-player victory conditions and see what they look like. France wins if she controls every capital city, fortress in the whole Grand Empire. Failing that, the coalition wins. So in a two-player game, it is very possible. I don't feel like France is guaranteed to win. But again, they still have the thing that they can do in most Napoleonic games, which is pick off one enemy at a time, force them into an enforced peace, and then go to the next enemy, right? And as long as you don't go into Russia or Spain, it's okay. France proved historically they could beat a coalition that doesn't include Prussia, Austria, and Russia. That's sort of the big deal. If you're facing all three of them, you've got a problem. Now, Spain is a potential problem because there's sort of an opening up here that can certainly cause issues. But Spain doesn't have a very powerful army. Throw the Brits in and whatnot, yeah, maybe. But, you have to remember the coalitions that took France down, the coalition that took France down after the Russian invasion was everyone. And you can pretty much engineer most Napoleonic games to prevent that from happening. Which means something has to be present in the victory conditions to change that whole thing, that whole nature. Because even in this situation where France got off to a horrible start, invading Britain, getting their army trapped there, they were able to manipulate the diplomatic realities of this game in such a way that they didn't lose their whole army, and that they were able to basically pick off one country at a time. And yeah. Does that happen in the two-player game? Probably not. Or it might not happen, which is to say you have the capabilities of bringing in bigger coalitions. But even, there's the limitations on Prussia, which if they hold, and Prussia doesn't go to war right away, and you get the Austerlitz scenario, you get yourself in this cycle where you can defeat everyone. So kind of a game that doesn't require you to invade Russia and or Spain to win is probably lacking something it needs. And I feel like the good ones, I don't recall, but Age of Napoleon and maybe Napoleonic Wars, I'm not so sure about Napoleonic Wars, but I'm pretty sure one of those required some sort of invasion of Russia and Spain, to win the game. Because if you don't do those things, it's too easy to just pick everyone off, and that's sort of the bane of every Napoleonic game. All right, we're gonna stop there. We're quitting this shit and calling it a French victory. We should have done this, last week probably. As soon as the surrender happened, I think it was clear.